The Satanic Temple is hosting a SatanCon in Scottsdale, and it is expected to set a record of being one of the largest Satanist gatherings.
And hundreds of Christians swarmed outside the Saguaro Hotel. Signs like "Satan has no rights," "Be gone, Satan," because right behind them is the first ever Satanist convention.
SatanCon will run today through Sunday. There will be speakers over the next couple of days. The event is sold out, as well as the Satanic Temple's Impurity Ball tonight at Pub Rock Live.
The devil has come to Scottsdale, sort of.
All right, so I'm stoked to be speaking at the first ever convention of the Satanic Temple, and since this is our first convention, and since this is my coming out as Satanist, I must open not by speaking to the fine people assembled in this room, but to the larger audience of the tens of thousands that I expect to see this on video. I'm going to be talking about myself a little bit. Much of this is anecdotal, what I'm going to be going over, but that can't be avoided. I only recently joined the Satanic Temple, and I held off for a number of reasons. One being that for me to be Satanist was too obvious. Some Christians have accused me not only of worshiping Satan, but of being Satan, and a member of the Illuminati as well. I'm clearly the lowest paid member. I'm still waiting on my checks. And even some atheists complain that I look too much like Satan to represent them, but I've never seen a picture of Satan that looked like me. Anton LaVey, maybe. I've seen pictures that look like him, not me. There's a slight difference in our appearance. But I get that in the minds of the believers that truth matters less than appearances. But that's why we're here, isn't it? Pushing the Overton window. And we've all seen more evil packed into one three-piece suit than in the entire audience at a black metal concert. And I've often said that I can't be satanic because I'm not young and sexy enough. And because I can't afford the wardrobe, because you all dress well. And even if I could fix that problem, that other one is just going to get worse. And another reason I didn't want to join is because I've been accused of being a devil worshiper ever since I was a teenager. And that would be in the late 70s, early 80s, when if you had a Harley or if you rode a motorcycle at all, then you probably had a criminal record to go with it. And when people thought that if you had long hair, then you're on drugs, or you're in a band on drugs. Which is weird because I never enjoyed drugs. I tried marijuana when I was 15, but I think it was laced with PCP, also known as angel dust. And that was a memorable couple of days that left a lasting impression on me. So back then, people thought that if you wear an earring in your left ear, it meant that you're gay. And if you wear an earring in your right ear, it meant you were a drug dealer.
That's switched in the 90s.
I might have these switched around. It doesn't matter because it's bullshit either way. But I happened to know, at that time, a gay drug dealer. And he didn't have either ear pierced. So I figured that since I'm neither selling dope nor smoking dick, that I should pierce both my ears just to balance the confusion in some people's minds. Because back then, men didn't wear two earrings because it meant you were either girly or a genie. What I did do was listen to heavy metal, the devil's music, back when Judas Priest and Black Sabbath were accused of recording backtracking messages on their songs that were inspiring teenagers to off themselves. I listened to metal because the music that my relatives, my family gatherings would most often play was that Dean Martin lounge lizard jazz that you would see on the Lawrence Welk show, where all the girls had long dresses and the guys had short hair and everybody had to be dull and bland and non-threatening, safe. So I would leave my family gatherings and seek solace from my savior, Ozzy, the Prince of Bleeping Darkness. And to make it worse, I also played Dungeons and Dragons. Now today, that would qualify me as a nerd, which is what I was then, really. But in the time of the Satanic Panic, they said, where they thought that if you played Dungeons and Dragons long enough or play it well enough, that you would be inducted into high levels of demonic witchcraft. And because the player's guidebooks included a monster manual, it was thought that just creating a campaign, designing a campaign to be played, would be like conjuring demons, and then playing the game would be like a seance. But I didn't just play D&D. I took it to the next level of uber nerd, and I did live action role playing. Uber nerdy as it is now, it had a very different impression on people then, especially the extremely religious fundamentalists who thought that having an interest in anything Gothic or having things like daggers or candle holders all meant that you were in league with Lucifer. And I know it didn't help that also at this time that I was dabbling in Eastern dogmas and neo-pagan spiritualism. My family was Mormon, and although I was baptized LDS, I never identified as Mormon because I didn't know if I believed everything necessary to be a Mormon. And how would I know, having not studied any other religions either, how would I know that one of them might not suit me better? So I just never called myself a Mormon. I knew that there were other religions, that there were different mythologies dedicated to strange gods and unfamiliar scriptures, and all making disparate claims, mutually exclusive to each other, such that they could not all be right, but they could all be wrong. And if there was one true faith, as they all claimed that each one was, then that would mean that all of the others were wrong, especially when they're all proclaiming absolute truth, because you find one flaw and the absolute is gone. So how much more wrong can you be? Which one of them are telling the truth, if any? And until that time, I had always believed in God, but I never believed in the Bible. Throughout my childhood, everyone I knew was a creationist until I was 14. I was the only one who understood what evolution even was, much less accepted it. And I knew how evolution worked because I had a book on dinosaurs given to me in the second grade, and that taught me what I needed. And I also knew that Adam and Eve was obviously a metaphorical fable, that these trees are parables. To eat of the fruit of the tree of this, everywhere in the Bible, it talks about the fruit of or the tree of. These are the results of actions taken or choices made, right? Only in Genesis is it treated like you could chop these things down and burn them. So everyone told me that the Bible was the Word of God and that God is infinite loving wisdom and all of that. So that if I read the Bible, then I would, and interpreted the parables correctly, then I would tap into supreme intelligence. Of course, you can't make it more than a few verses into any chapter of the Bible before you realize it was not written by a superior intelligence, and that wisdom and love and all that are absent, almost absent from that book. I think there's two verses out of the whole Bible that I could call wise, and the only reason they are is because they contradict all the rest of it. Instead, my impression was that the Bible was written by ignorant, bigoted, superstitious savages who were obsessed with bloodshed and trying to cite and assert assumed authority to justify genocide. And I tried to read the Bible when I was 12, and I didn't even make it out of Genesis before I threw it across the room in disgust because of all of the absurdities, atrocities, inconsistencies, and contradictions therein, especially when you're so disappointed that you think you're reading the ultimate wisdom and intelligence, and everything he says is stupid. So, I prayed to God at 12. I threw the book across the room and I prayed to God that he had better explain himself. He had better either justify all this evil and horror that was attributed to him in the Bible, or show how the Bible got him all wrong, distance himself from the Bible. And if he did neither, then he could not have my soul. I still believed in hell because I was 12. And I knew the risk. So I was really putting my soul on the line, because how could I spend eternity pretending to worship something that is so a malicious, small-minded despot that I can't even respect, much less admire? You ever see the Twilight Zone episode of little Anthony Fremont? Right, the little kid that can wish things into the cornfield. Yeah, so imagine being trapped with that. You're in his house for all eternity. You always have to say, no matter what a horrible thing he does, that's good that you did that, Anthony. That's real good. Yeah, you want to spend eternity like that? Perpetually kissing that kid's ass? Fortunately, that prayer was answered, as I lived to see endless reasons to discount the Bible as man-made mythology. However, I still believed in God, and I still considered myself a Christian. My best friend in high school went on to become a Southern Baptist, an ordained Southern Baptist minister and the principal of a Christian school that teaches a literal interpretation of the Bible as the only source of truth in our world. Only source, meaning that facts and evidence, dismissed. They believe the Bible, not reality. Let every man be a liar, let reality itself be a lie, as Martin Luther once said. So he converted me, and I was reborn in Christ for a few hours. After I accepted Jesus, I was floating around in this euphoria like you do, like so many people do whenever they accept or adopt a belief in any God. You have this transition period where you think something great has happened to you. So, until I finally came to my senses, and I asked my friend, I said, how do I know if this sensation of elation is real, or is it just really Jesus, or is this just am I fooling myself with a trick of the mind? And so he grabbed me by both shoulders with a huge beaming smile and said, just keep telling yourself it's Jesus until you believe it. His philosophy, and he expressed it that way, was that he believed in fake it till you make it. Keep lying to yourself until you believe your own bullshit. And he used those words. Fake it till you make it. But hearing him admit that, to just keep telling yourself until you believe it, I saw that instantly as how dishonest. And the spell was broken. He deconverted me faster than he converted me. It was over in an instant. And after a few hours of reflection, I was an atheist. I didn't know that I was an atheist yet. I didn't know that because Christians tried to redefine what atheism is. They told me that an atheist is someone who knows there is no God, or that an atheist is someone who believes in nothing, rather than not having to make believe anything on faith. Because the believers have to twist everything you don't believe into something you do believe, because that's the only way they can push the burden of proof back onto you. Because Christians hate nothing more than the burden of proof. So I was an atheist for 15 years before I found out that the word only meant someone who does not believe in God, not necessarily someone who has a belief that there is no God. Now, I have a belief that there is no God. I eventually came to that conclusion, but that makes me a subset of those who do not believe that God exists. And I know we're not supposed to, because of deceptive media of the day, tabloid TV and such, I still thought there was scientific evidence of telepathy, life force, extra-dimensional beings, paranormal psychic phenomenon, all of that. Even the people that watched Star Wars and Star Trek believed in that shit. And then you had actors from the first two generations of Star Trek were doing shows like In Search of and Beyond Belief, right? Trying to promote that all of this is real. So I'm thinking there's something there. I'm still a kid, right? And so I bought into some of that, and I wanted to know what was real about it. But how can you find that out when you already know that you can't trust any of the scriptures? And I know you're not supposed to question religion because heresy, blasphemy, and apostasy have been traditionally treated as capital crimes, earning a death penalty, or worse. But I grew up in 20th century America, where blasphemy is not a crime, it's a right. I had questions, and the only way I was going to get reliable answers was through direct experience with the supernatural, via transcendental meditation and what they used to call practice of the occult. Back then, I would describe myself now, who I was back then, as a neo-pagan. But back then, I didn't know what I was. So when people asked me what my religion was, I said that I'm an agnostic pagan for Christ. When I was a young man, one of my former employers knew that my family was Mormon. And so he thought I was Mormon too. And here in Arizona, y'all know what Mormons look like, right? I never looked like that. And although there was a time in my youth when I would get a haircut every time I had to go to court. But my boss thought I was Mormon, and he thought that Mormons were satanic. He thought that Satanists were devil worshippers. So he threatened me with physical violence. That when you go to the Mormon temple, you go to pray to Satan, don't you? And I said, I'm not Mormon. And he got confused. He said, what are you then? And I said, believe me, you don't want to know. And he walked away. He was threatening me a minute ago, and then he walked away. It was as if he thought that if I was Mormon, and thus demonic, that he could beat me up or fire me or whatever. But my answer made him step back with the realization that there might be something even worse than a devil worshiper. And somehow that earned his respect. Well, he did confront me one more time when I told him that I don't believe in either God or Satan. And he told me that means that I worship Satan. And I said, how do you figure that? And he says, well, you don't believe in the devil, then you don't believe in the Bible, because the devil is in the Bible, and the Bible is the Word of God, wherein God said that you are either with me or against me. So the only choices are that you either have to be a Bible-believing Christian or you're a devil worshiper. And I commented on his dizzying intellect and said that, I don't believe in Daffy Duck either. Does that mean I worship him too? So he got my point, and he didn't bother me after that. Even after I agreed to work on Christmas and Thanksgiving, as long as I had Halloween off. And Memorial Day weekend, so that I could go camping in the woods at a huge pagan festival of homegrown hedonism with belly dancers around the fire and a drum circle and all of that. Because to deny me that is to deny my religious freedom. And Christians told me that anything that is not of Jesus is from the devil. That all the pagan witches really worship Satan knowingly, and that the entire pantheon of Hindu gods are all different aspects or characterizations of the Christian devil. And so 800 million Hindus are secretly satanic even if they don't know it. And supposedly the Muslims are unwittingly devil worshippers too, and the Freemasons too, except willingly so. Basically, everyone who isn't Christian, well, everyone who isn't a Protestant Christian, because, Catholics are Mary-worshipping pagans. Thus, obviously irreverent, sacrilegious agnostics like myself must be demonic too, right? More so than anyone else. However, of all these non-Christian religious groups, the non-Christian religions, you know who doesn't believe in any devils at all? Satanists! Go figure, right? That's just one of the many lies we hear from those proclaiming God's truth. It's no wonder that Christians don't know what Satanists believe. My lifelong conflict with religion began with Baptists misrepresenting what Jews, pagans, Catholics, Mormons, and atheists believe. And it only got worse when I saw that Christian nationalists were lying about science, sex, and social studies in public school classrooms to other people's sequestered students. And I became an atheist activist primarily in defense of students' rights, specifically because the actual factual truth matters more to me than whatever I might rather believe. I was fooled before by faith when I thought I had the truth, before I learned what the truth really meant. The truth is what the facts are, what we can show to be true, not whatever else we assume or imagine beyond or instead of that. All of that is speculation, and we leave that to religion. But there are a hell of a lot of lies in every religion. So, every one of these God-fearing religions, let's put it this way. So just like Martin Luther said, the father of Protestant Christianity, he said, what harm would it do if a man told a good, strong lie for the sake of the good and for the Christian church. Because Christians always defend the lies of their faith. They say, well, what's wrong with lying? Luther also admitted that faith must trample underfoot all reason, sense, and understanding, and whatever it sees, it must put out of sight and wish to know nothing but the Word of God. And I've encountered believers who admitted that these may be what the facts are, but I prefer to believe this. Or, why does it have to be true before I believe it? And one of my best friends said, I'm Christian because I like to believe that, not because I think it's true, having no idea what he had just admitted to me. And one woman told me that if she had a time machine and was able to go back and watch Jesus be crucified and die, and watch him get entombed or whatever, watch his body rot for a week, that she hopes that her faith would be strong enough to keep believing even when her eyes tell her otherwise. They admit that it doesn't matter what the truth is, they're going to believe what they want to believe regardless, and no amount of proof is ever going to change their minds. William Jennings Bryan, the creationist attorney in the Scopes monkey trial, famously declared that if the Bible said that Jonah swallowed the whale, I would believe it. A minister on a documentary called Questioning Darwin said something similar. He said, if the Bible said that 2 + 2 = 5, I would believe it. Mathematic proof is absolute, but that doesn't matter to faith. All goes to show that believers don't care what the truth really is. They'd rather make believe something else instead. Thus, faith is the most dishonest and auto-deceptive perspective it is possible to have. It is not a reliable path to truth, but it's a great way to stay wrong forever and never know it, or never admit it even if you do know it. Because faith means never having to admit when you're always wrong. Their belief system doesn't allow admission or correction of error. And the only way to make a believer any more dishonest is if they become a religious apologist, which essentially means making up excuses, every excuse imaginable to justify every error in an a priori assumption, or to systematically dismiss and rationalize away any and all evidence against it, to convince themselves of what is not evidently true nor even possible. If Jesus was the truth, he would neither need nor want apologists lying for him the way they all do and have always done. Are these seats available? Because there's people standing over there. Some of you can fit in these seats up here. Okay, very good. I got standing room only here. I got no pictures of that, but yeah. Okay, so Friedrich Nietzsche said that faith means not wanting to know what is true. And his contemporary Mark Twain wrote that faith is believing what you know ain't so. Both accurate assessments. I have dedicated my life to combating the lies of religion, particularly those of creationism, because when you debate the loftier notions of theism, it all melts into nebulous philosophy where everything becomes an opinion, and you can still pretend that Descartes had a defensible position despite what Hume says, despite what Descartes says to contradict himself. So I focus on creationism, because that's where believers make testable, demonstrably false claims, where we can unambiguously prove the fact or expose the fraud, such that any undecided spectator will immediately see how the religious right is wrong. That put me in conflict with Christian nationalists in their imagined culture war against science, secular policies, and even the Constitution. I'm on the board of directors of American Atheists, a position I hold very proudly. But I paid for membership in the Satanic Temple too, because I admire how this organization can sometimes defend the First Amendment better, it seems, than mere atheists can. Because when some Christian group wants to put up the 10 Commandments that they've never read, can't remember, and don't understand, atheists might put up a monument to science or something like that, and nobody would even get the point of it. And if the Hindus want to put up a statue of Hanuman, nobody knows what that is, and they don't take it seriously. It's only when the Satanists show up with their Baphomet statue that suddenly they realize that this was supposed to be a secular nation that didn't promote any religion. It's just like when they're all about vouchers for religious education until the Muslim schools want to take advantage of that. Then they remember what the Establishment Clause is all about. More recently, the Satanic Temple stepped up to defend women's reproductive rights where I live in Texas, when our religiously biased Supreme Court chose to ignore and thus tacitly allow a grossly unconstitutional law to stand. That's when I joined TST. Now, I think the Satanic Temple might need to get involved in Oklahoma Students' Religious Belief Protection Act, which would charge teachers $10,000 fines if they teach anything that contradicts a student's religion. That's any student of any religion. So you can't teach world geography or the theory of gravity to a flat earther. Now, atheists don't have a standing in that because despite the lie that Christians tell you all the time, atheism is not a religion. And evolution is not a religion either. It's literally a fact of life, demonstrable both in the lab and in the field, verifiable in real time. It is not a belief and neither requires nor desires faith, which finally gets me to what I was supposed to talk about. Today is February 12th. The birthday of a famous bearded figure you may have heard of, kind of a big deal in history. Someone who, among other things, publicly condemned slavery. And while I could say that of a couple of people who were born on this day in the year 1809, I am at this moment talking about Abraham Lincoln, also known as Honest Abe. And why did they call him that? I think it might have been, in part, due to this letter wherein he said, I believe it is an established maxim in morals that he who makes an assertion without knowing whether it is true or false is guilty of falsehood, and the accidental truth of the assertion does not justify or excuse him. Now, before I knew about Lincoln's statement, I'd been saying the similar thing, albeit differently, for years. The way I put it was that it is dishonest to assert baseless speculation as though it was a matter of fact, pretending to know what no one even can know, yet that is what all religions do. I said that was tantamount to lying, but Lincoln took the extra step and said that it is lying. Now, believers tell me that it's not a lie if they believe it to be true, but you're still expressing an opinion as if it was a fact. A fact is objectively verifiable data. So if you can't show that it's a fact, you don't get to call it one, and you shouldn't call it truth either unless you can show the truth of it. If you can't show it, you don't know it, because if you can't confirm what you say to any degree at all by any means whatsoever, then you can't even know if you know what you merely believe. Presuppositionalists like to tell me that we can't know anything unless we know everything, or you know someone who knows everything. But by that mystifying perversion of logic, it means that you don't know anything if you don't know everything, and so you wouldn't even know if you know someone who knows everything. You wouldn't even know that. So the only thing that you can know, that you can honestly say that you know, is what you can show objectively so that we can see it too. And that's what I find to be the most irritating thing about religion, when believers confuse conviction with knowledge. Oh, I don't just believe there's a God, I know there is. No, you don't, Joe Bob, you just believe because you don't know any better. Have you noticed the unabashed arrogance of ignorance? As if some uneducated adult who never studied anything can look up the wrong website for a minute and think they know more than all the world's best educated expert specialists anywhere ever, in any field. And this effect was known long before Dunning and Kruger gave it a name. In fact, there was another bearded fellow born 213 years ago, today, on the same day and year as Lincoln, who noted the same thing. When Charles Darwin said, ignorance more often begets confidence than does knowledge. Now look at how everyone lied about Darwin. Creationists tell us that Darwin was a eugenicist, and that Hitler was a Darwinist, and that Darwinism killed millions in communist Russia, when in fact Darwin wrote against eugenics, Hitler wrote against Darwinism, and it was Stalin's rejection of Darwinian science that directly led to the starvation of millions in the world's worst famine ever. Now, creationists have always lied about Darwin. There was a nurse named Lady Hope who told the story that she had attended Darwin at his bedside, and that in his last moments he recanted his theory of evolution and accepted Jesus. However, each of Darwin's children said, no, Dad never said anything like that, and we never met Lady Hope because she was never even there. The wanna-believers hate Darwin because he was first and foremost a scientist, and he revealed an inconvenient truth. Although his goal was not to overturn the Genesis myth, he saw that science points in a different direction. He said, "My theology is a simple muddle. I cannot look at the universe as a result of blind chance, yet I can see no evidence of beneficent design, or indeed design of any kind, in the details. As for each variant or each variation that has ever occurred having been preordained for a special end, I can no more believe that than that the spot on which each raindrop falls has been specially ordained." Remember, religious fundamentalists have to believe by any means, even dishonesty. So these reality-denying extremists point to Piltdown Man, which was a fraud that was perpetrated against evolutionary scientists and was exposed by evolutionary science using the science of evolution to do it. Yet creationists pretend as if evolution is a hoax, as if Piltdown Man means that evolution is a hoax, and to support their own claims of creationism, they have their own hoaxes, like the Sacred Shroud of Turin, which turned out to be a medieval painting. Then there are the artificial fossils of human and dinosaur footprints being peddled by Dr. Carl Baugh, one of many pseudoscience charlatans with a bogus PhD pretending to have actual credentials. And there's also a hoax among the Tucson artifacts, which include a sword made of lead that has Hebrew inscriptions on it and a scrawling of a sauropod dinosaur flicking a forked tongue as if it was a lizard. Now, these artifacts were buried in an already existing archaeological site 100 years ago so that they would be discovered the next day. And the intention was that it was supposed to fool the archaeologists into thinking that Jewish immigrants came to the United States before Columbus and that they had witnessed dinosaurs. However, not only did no one ever make a sword out of lead, think about how effective that would be. Whomp! Oh. But the Hebrew scripts that were written on it turned out to have been copied verbatim from a textbook on how to learn Hebrew language. And then there were the Ica stones, a collection of fraudulent carvings on allegedly pre-Columbian artifacts. The pictures were modeled after plastic dinosaur toys from the 1960s, and a number of Peruvian natives have confessed to having made these stones on commission of a crooked dentist who was trying to bilk tourists. But people like Kent Hovind will still present these as if they're legitimate pre-Columbian artifacts. But the crowning fraud of all creationism has to be Ron Wyatt, who claimed to have found Noah's Ark at the top of Mount Ararat, right where the Bible said it should be. See, snowmelt over a rocky obstruction created a boat-shaped island. You know, as the snow flows around, it takes dirt around and leaves a hill that's roughly canoe-shaped. And since it looked like a boat, Wyatt called it Noah's Ark. And to make it worse, he took other creationists up there, like famous creationists with reputations to protect, and he showed them this pile of dirt, and they left in disgust, having bought into his bullshit. Ron Wyatt also claimed to have found the exact spot where Jesus was crucified, which was directly over a hidden underground chamber that no one else has ever seen. And he goes into this room, and he kept it secret where it was. He didn't want anyone to know. So he followed a trail of some kind of a reddish trace from the remains of what he said was a cross down to the Ark of the Covenant, which was sitting directly below. And he found a bottle cap on the floor, because that's what you find in secret chambers like this. And he scraped a bit of this reddish material off the wall, and he declared it to be Jesus' blood. And then he took that bottle cap with the red whatever on it and put it under his own microscope, and then published a statement that the reanimated undead cells of Jesus' blood came reanimated again, right before his eyes. He lost Jesus' blood because it was unimportant now, I guess. And there was no way to test or confirm anything he ever said. You can't just say something's true because you want it to be. That's called lying. And most of the time, though, you'll notice that defenders of the faith can make any crackpot claim they want. and other believers will just let it slide as if it doesn't matter. But if you get anything wrong in a public statement, you're debating people online or whatever, you get anything wrong about science or history or philosophy or even theology, and your own allies will come down on you for it. Very unforgiving of error. Learn the lesson that I did. Everybody's wrong about something somewhere. Doesn't mean you're wrong about everything. You've got to be wrong about something somewhere, right? There has to be something you can correct. And that's the purpose of science, right? Is to seek out and expose the flaws in our current understanding and correct them. If your sources can be mistaken and mislead you. So if you find out that they're wrong and thus you're wrong, or for whatever reason you realize you're wrong, own it as soon as you can. It is to your benefit. And the moment you admit to being wrong is the moment you stop being wrong. If I get something wrong, other atheists will publish books condemning me for it. I'm speaking from personal experience here. It's happened. They could just tell me why it's wrong and I'll fix it. So while I think that was an overreaction and maybe unproductive, it is nonetheless necessary that there be some way to hold us accountable, because if our motive really is to improve our understanding, then we should be careful not to say things are true unless we can show that they are, and we should get into the habit of knowing how to show that they are. So it took me a while to figure that out, and I was reprimanded harshly a couple of times because I read something from Voltaire, for example. One of my errors was that Voltaire said that the Nicene Convention had been done to establish what the doctrine of Christianity would be. And then there was some famous Christian author that was saying the same thing. So I thought, if these two people are saying the same thing, that must be true, right? Well, then the people versed in Christian theology come down on me and say, no, that's not, okay, fine. Believers pretend that fantasy is reality and that all of reality must be a lie, especially evolution. And I offer a two-part challenge to such believers. 1, name an evolutionary scientist who ever lied while promoting evolution over creationism. Give me the name, quote the lie verbatim, and then show me how we know that that was not true and that the person who said it knew it wasn't true when they said it. No one has ever answered that challenge. Nor the second part of the challenge either, which is to name a professional creationist who did not lie when promoting creationism over evolution. In which case, just give me the name. I'll show you where they lied and how we know that they knew better than whatever they said. I will never understand why some people would rather believe in a fantasy than embrace reality, especially given the indefensible fairy tale in question. Because we know for absolutely certain that Adam and Eve are just a parable. Noah's Ark, the Tower of Babel, these things did not literally happen. We know that they didn't. They didn't happen as described. There may be some interpretation where you could say that there's a kernel of truth to one or two of these stories. And evidently, the Exodus never happened either. Adam and Eve, definitely just a parable. It's a fairy tale with a moral. And the story is adopted from elder mythology, from all of this. There's not even a kernel of truth to that. But you have to believe it. You have to believe this fable of creation without question, reservation, or reason, or else suffer a fate worse than death. So let's look at this story, shall we? Another advantage of this being the first ever convention of the Satanic Temple is that I looked on the schedule, nobody else was talking about this, so I get to be the first. And it may be that you all know this already, but the people in the video audience don't. So that's why I'm doing it. So Christians say that Adam's sin brought death into the world. But that's a lie. What the Bible actually says is that there was 2 trees to choose from, and Adam could have eaten from the fruit of the tree of eternal life. And if he had, then he would live forever. But he didn't eat from that tree. He had to eat. He had to ingest and digest living cells in order to survive, which is the definition of an animal, because he was mortal already. Now, what about that other tree of knowledge of good and evil? We know now that death was already in the world from the moment of creation. There's no way out of that. God says when he at the end of that story, he has to get Adam and Eve out of the garden. because to stop Adam from eating from the fruit of the tree, because then he'll live forever. And then he won't be like the gods, then he'll be a god. So this is just the one way that Christians have constantly misinterpreted their own scripture. Isn't it weird when you know more about both sides of this argument than they know of their own alone? So God put a poison tree right in the middle of the garden, because it says it's in the middle of the garden. And he planted a snake to set the trap. And he created Adam as a naive noob who doesn't know right from wrong. So you're going to punish him for figuring out right from wrong at a time when he was neither competent nor culpable, and therefore shouldn't be you can't legally punish him, but God is going to punish him anyway because God is unjust and evil, and God is a liar. He told Adam not to eat the fruit, saying that for on the day thou eatest of it, thou shalt surely die. But the serpent said, Ye shall not surely die, for God doth know that in the day you eat thereof, then your eyes will be opened, and ye will be as gods, knowing good from evil. And so they ate, and they didn't die like God said they would. Instead, they lived on to a ripe old age, times 10. Being what we now today would call immortal, because most of our immortal characters don't live that long. Dracula only lived half as long as Adam. Instead, their eyes were opened and they knew right from wrong, just like the serpent said. Now, it's important to note that God lied to Adam and Eve, and then Adam and Eve lied to God. But the serpent is the only character in the story who never lied. God is the Lord of lies. God himself is a lie. To defend belief in God is to participate in a lie. In the Sacred Fables, which is a book of lies, God lies again and again. He lied to Adam about the tree and about the consequences because he made up a new set of punishments that weren't what he said they were going to do. Elsewhere, the scriptures read that God has greatly deceived his people. O Lord, thou hast deceived me, and I was deceived. The Lord hath put a lying spirit in the mouth of the prophets, and if a prophet be deceived when he hath spoken a thing, I, the Lord, have deceived that prophet. So God not only lies, he brags about lying. How can you say that we are wise and that the law of the Lord is with us? Look, the lying pen of the scribes has made it into a lie. For this cause God shall send them strong delusion, that they shall believe a lie, and they do. Christians today said that the serpent was Satan, and that Satan was the Lord of lies, but that's just another lie in itself. Again, the Bible doesn't say that, nor does that even allow that interpretation, since the serpent was supposed to be cursed to crawl on his belly for all the rest of his days. But the first time we see Satan mentioned by name is in a story chronologically after that one, and Satan is described as walking and working with God, because they're still friends. They've never had a falling out. So there's an inconsistency in the story. And then, Christians will say that, in Revelations, it says that Satan is that old serpent. Yeah, but it doesn't mean that old serpent. It also says he's standing on the beach with 7 heads, which maybe is a detail that should have been in Genesis if it was written by better people. And let's remember in the middle of the book that Jesus calls the Pharisees a bunch of vipers and the sons of Satan, but he doesn't mean that they're all individual Pharisees are Satan, right? These are figures of speech and so forth. So the serpent in the garden was an adaptation of the character of the serpent who could not be tamed from the Hillipoo tree in the Epic of Gilgamesh. It's a completely different character. It was only ever supposed to be a snake. Now, in the story of Job, God made a bet with Satan. You're not supposed to make bets with the devil, but special pleading, it's okay when God does it. And God forced Satan to do the only evil that Satan ever does in the Bible. And God did some evil too, like he always does. But this time God used the excuse that the devil made me do it. Otherwise, what's the worst thing that Satan ever did? He tried to reason with Jesus. And that's only evil because faith is assumed without reason and defended against all reason. And trying to reason with someone, to reason them out of faith, is just harshing their buzz, man. As I understand it, the character of Satan is based on the Zoroastrian deity Ahriman HaShatan, the opposer or enemy. Specifically, he's an enemy against faith, meaning that he's reasonable. And despite being called a lord of lies, folklore always depicts Satan as a man of his word. An honest person, albeit much maligned for trying to help people out of their dishonest delusions. The name is also a title, such that anyone who tries to wield truth against lies, to try to reason people out of faith, anyone who does that is a Satan. That's me. That's all you. All of you. Hail all of us. Hail Satan. Thank you very, very much.